Hey folks, it's Frithgar here, how you doing? Welcome back to Alps Panorama at the Northern Sea here in Farming Simulator 19. Eventually, they came up with an entirely different system. They got rid of the fans altogether, and they had this new system where it was a compressed air system, and it would, every time the ram came in, no, not every time, sorry, it wasn't every time the ram came in, it was whenever the knotters triggered, that just before the knots triggered, it would blast them with a blast of compressed air. And then the knots would be made, and then it would blast them again with compressed air. And I think it also blasted them every so often, like it was, because the knot is triggered, let me show you on here, the knot itself is triggered on here, right? That decides the bale length. So you got this one, right, this little star wheel, and you'll see those on the back of every baler. I don't think there is any other way. It's a mechanical method. It doesn't need an electronic sensor or anything like that. It simply just walks round in a circle, and then you've got a little tooth on this side as well. So when that one there has completed one full rotation, or like a number of rotations, whatever the rotations set are, this one here, it works its way up. It's on a ratchet, and it just works. See that little hooked piece of metal there on the top? If I zoom in a little bit, it's going to be too close to it. Can't quite see it. There's a little kind of rounded hooked piece of metal there, and basically that just walks upwards, and just keeps walking upwards on a ratchet. It's on a gear on there, which is powered by that star wheel, which sticks right into the straw. So it pushes it all out. And then when that one reaches the top, it drops down. It's a simple mechanism like that. It just drops down, and that triggers the knotters. And then the knotters, they only fire at a certain point on the ram. And I think the way they did it was that it would trigger that one, and then the first time the ram went through, the knotters wouldn't actually drop down. The knotters wouldn't actually engage the first time it happened. Right, I've got enough material on it. There we go. I wanted to move that one back like that. They wouldn't actually engage the first time it happened. It would do a long blast of air, and then the next time the ram moved back out of the way, then the knotters would engage. And the reason that the ram would have to move out of the way for the knotters to engage is because there are needles underneath the baler. Let's have a look, see if we can see. Are the needles? Yes, those there are the needles. Right, the string actually threads through the bottom end of those needles, and then when the ram is pulled back, those needles, they go up straight through. So they basically, as soon as the ram pulls back, those needles go up, and that takes the string up to the knotters at the top. They cycle round. They just it's on a simple gear mechanism. That cycles over, and that ties the knot, and it cuts the string, and then the knotters come back, and then the ram comes back. The ram doesn't pause, okay? All of that happens in the time it takes for one ram stroke. So the ram goes up, knotters go up, and the needles go up and down again, and then it all carries on. And it works beautifully. It's like poetry in motion. It really is. It's a very simple mechanism, and it's the exact same mechanism that has been used since balers first started using mechanical knotters. So nothing has really changed on it apart from the size and a few little tweaks, just to make it a bit more efficient with a few things, and in particular keep the knotting mechanisms clean. And that's the biggest and most difficult part of it, is keeping those knotting mechanisms clean. Because unless you can keep them clean, it doesn't really work. You've got to keep them absolutely spotless in order for them to work properly, because otherwise you get a load of rubbish caught up in the knot and it doesn't tie off properly. So the jets of air, that work quite well, and I've seen combinations these days of jets of air with fans on them as well. So I don't really know what the newest ones are. I haven't looked at a new baler for quite some time. But the last time I looked at a baler, it had a combination of compressed air being blasted onto the knotters and fans running continuously as well. A lot of the fans worked on... Well, they kind of work on, like, you've got fans going at every angle. And I was going to say they work on a negative pressure thing, where they sort of pull it out, but they don't. It's It's difficult to explain. Because if you've got the fans only moving in one direction, obviously the fans themselves, they get covered up with a load of dust and then they stop working. Because they can't draw anything through it, because they've got a load of dust all on one side. And I have seen, though, fans that they work by blasting down underneath the knotters to stop that big blast. When the blast of dust comes up from the ram, the fans are actually pushing that dust down and away from the knotters, and that seems to work quite well. And then there's other ones that do similar things, but they've also got compressed air that runs, and that keeps the back of the fan clean as well. So you've got sort of combinations of the two, and the companies that make these balers, like Claas and Krone and so on, and Claas is the ones that I've seen the most of. I've used Claas quadrant balers quite a lot, and I've seen all sorts of changes to those, and they've put in a lot of work to it. You know, it started off as not being a priority at all, as just sort of being a minor inconvenience, to being something that they've put a lot of quality engineering into, just keeping the dust off of that bit on the top, and that's the single most important part of those knotters, is stopping the dust from accumulating. And it's quite impressive to see the level of engineering that has now gone into that. But the actual basic knotting mechanism is still exactly the same as it was. You know, I've used old balers that were made back in the 40s, when balers were first being used, when they were first being made. And the knotting mechanism on it, whilst it looks smaller and the overall appearance of it is a lot simpler, the actual knotting mechanism, the way it works and the way it forms the knot, is identical to the ones on brand new balers. Unless they've come up with some new idea that I'm unaware of, they're still exactly the same, right? It's still the same identical knotting mechanism that has been used for nearly 100, well, it's well over 100 years, because the actual knotting mechanism was made quite a long time ago. I don't know exactly when it was made. I do know that it was made by someone, something to do with a spinning wheel. It was actually a woman with a spinning wheel. She invented this knotting mechanism, and it was something to do with spinning. I've no idea what the whole story was with the spinning and that, but that's where it originally came from. And I've always thought that was quite a fascinating bit of general knowledge trivia about the knots and the mechanisms on the balers, is the way that it was invented by someone to do with a spinning wheel. And this woman invented it to do something to do with the spinning. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I cannot remember. It's a very long time since I was told about it. But I always think it's quite amazing. If you compare the knotters on these, yes, these look a little bit different. They do look a bit more robust, and there's a few different tweaks in that have been altered on them. But the basic thing, you look at it, and you can see that they're still the same thing. It's still the same mechanism. And it's very much a situation of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm sure that there have been some people who have tried to manufacture a new knotting mechanism, make it completely different to the ones that we have now, but I don't know if they've actually been successful with finding something that will replace the original knotting mechanism or not, because as far as I know, it is still exactly the same one. Right. There is our baling. I'm just going to leave that one there. I'm going to leave the track there as well. There is our baling done. Our next task now is to go and get our truck, and we want to start gathering up the bales. So we've got two choices with this. We can either gather up the bales with this trailer, and we can do it like that, or we can use the truck and get a bigger trailer. Except that the trailer that I would have available with a truck doesn't stack the bales in straight threes like that. It does actually stagger them. So I'm thinking now it's probably better if we do actually use we'll use the tractor that we were using rather than the Skittles one. Just because this one will go a little bit slower, and also it's only got the single wheels on it, and I don't think we need double wheels at the moment. It's going to make it a little bit more difficult to go and gather things up with the double wheels. So we'll leave that one for doing some double-wheeled work. And this one here can do the gathering the bales. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm not going to mess around trying to get a whole load of bales stacked up in the shed using the front loader or using the loader. I'm not going to do it like that. What I am going to do, though, is I am going to gather up these bales here. Just go there. Large square bales. That's good. Right, so we will gather up these like this. There. And then I will go and finish getting a full load. And we'll just also unload into the shed. I think it's just going to be a bit easier. So we'll do it like this. Nice and quick and simple. And then we'll unload them into the shed. And it's going to be slightly difficult. We are going to have to be able to back them in. Probably be easier if we didn't have a trailer with a dolly on it. But I'm confident that we can do a little bit of reversing with one of these tractors. One of these trailers. It's a bit more of a challenge trying to reverse these. These are always the ones that are difficult to reverse. I remember when I was working years and years ago, I used to do harvest work every summer. I started doing it when I was about 15 and did it until I think I was 22, something like that. So I did several years of it. I did a lot of load-all work. I spent many, many, many hours using a load-all and stacking bales. But I also did a lot of baling and a lot of other jobs as well, but all associated with baling and with moving straw off of fields. And that's all we did. We did baling and we moved the straw off of the fields. I wasn't involved with the harvest or anything like that, or not the actual grain harvest. It was the straw harvest that we did. That's what we were there for. I worked for someone who would buy the straw. And then we would get this straw and stack it all up, and then he would sell it through the winter. So this one guy that worked for us for a couple of years, well, worked for us, or worked for them for a couple of, worked with me, for a couple of years. He'd never driven a trailer with a turntable on it. Now, to be fair, I'd not really done it either, and I wasn't all that concerned about it because the number of times we had to use a trailer with a turntable on it you'd count them on one hand, right? We had a truck that we stacked everything up in the fields into stacks of 14. You did 4 bales, one on top of the other, and you did another 4 bales, one on top of the other, and you put them up against them, so you made 8 bales, 2 by 4, and then you'd get 3 bales and you put them on top in the opposite direction, and then you get another 3 bales and you put them on top, so you had 6 stacked up on top of the 8 to make 14 bales. And then this lorry would come along, and you know how the back of the artisan picks up, it opens up and picks up to let go of the bales? Well, the back of this truck would do it kind of like that, except that, right, let's just do that there a minute, and then I want to go to there. Let's just, right, that's going out the back of the shed a little bit, so I want to go forward. Right, that's about right there. So then I can unload those there, and we'll go and get our next load. So yeah, the truck, the stacker truck, it was just called. The stacker truck would go along and pick up these 14 bales, and then you would drive it back to the stack site. And so one person was on a stacker truck all the time, driving backwards and forwards as fast as they could, and then we usually had 2 people on load-alls going around the fields stacking up the bales, and then there was 2 or 3 people working balers as well. Several years I was driving load-alls. My dream was always driving the balers. I loved driving the balers, but I wasn't allowed to do that for several years, and I was always put on a load-all, which I was always bitterly disappointed about, because driving the balers was so much better than driving the load-alls. For one, the air conditioning in them was poor, to say the least. But also, I always found it to be a lot more of a soul-destroying job going into a field just like that, and then having to stack up thousands of bales. I mean, this was small, right? You'd see them right over to the far horizon, just thousands of bales, and you'd have to go along and stack them all up into stacks of 14. It was a soul-destroying job. It really was. I spent a long time doing it. So, yeah, this is one of the reasons why I don't like to do too much stacking work in the game, because I've had my fill of driving telehandlers and stacking bales in real life. I really have. I've done enough to last me a lifetime. Anyway, we'd get them all stacked up like that, and then the stacker truck would be the one that would come along and gather them all up and take them all off the field. So we didn't normally use trailers like this. We didn't often have a trailer with a turntable on it. Very, very occasionally there would be circumstances that would dictate that the stacker truck wasn't suitable, because the stacker truck was quite an old beast, and it had this habit of hissing and spitting. It was quite noisy. Because it was such an antiquated old beastie, it had a bit of a problem with the air lines on it. The air generator on it would constantly sort of kick in and out every now and then. It cost quite a bit to replace it all, so you'd have the air thing kicking in quite frequently and then hissing randomly. Now, as you can imagine, that could be a problem if you're going anywhere near anybody that was riding a horse, because you had no way of controlling it. It would literally just do it whenever it felt like it. So when you're going past a horse, every now and then it would suddenly go this massive great game, and you really don't want to do that when you've got a horse going past you that's already nervous because you're going past this great big truck. Yeah, we got more than one really serious scowl from riders, and there's nothing you can do about it apart from apologize, really sorry. There was absolutely nothing we could do about it. Now, some places that we worked, we were working around an area called Newbury. Now, Newbury is famous. In particular, there's an area close to Newbury. I can't remember what it's called. It's Longford or Longstone or something. I can't remember now. But anyway. Doesn't really matter what it's called. It's known generally as the Valley of the Racehorse, and it's one of the most famous places in the world for breeding racehorses. Horses were everything in this particular area, and I mean everything. Everything else was insignificant. The farming that was done, the grain that was grown, that was all just to go through the motions. It didn't matter. It was insignificant, and it did not matter in the slightest. If they needed to do stuff with the horses, you downed tools. Grain was not harvested. Combines did not run. Tractors did not run at certain times of the day when they were exercising the horses. It simply did not happen. Horses took priority. Horses were worth millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions even. It was massive money, and there were hundreds and hundreds of racehorses there all the time, right? It was seriously big money, big place, big everything, and it was all horses. Horses were the top priority at all times about everything. Nothing else mattered apart from the horses. Right? And I cannot emphasize enough just how important the horses were in this area. So, the only time that we would ever use something other than a stacker truck was when we worked there, because we went there with the stacker truck and it hissed, startled a horse, and they said that vehicle is never ever allowed back here again. You take it away, we don't want it here. And that was it. There was no second chance. There was no option. It wasn't sort of, oh, can we try something a little bit different? No, that does not ever come back. That scared a horse. There may be a horse that sees that and remembers the noise and is made nervous by it. Doesn't matter. We don't care. You're not bringing that back here ever. So for that area, we had to do something different. And what we did was we had a couple of trailers like this, and we loaded them up with straw and we took them away. We were able to use the stacker truck for large portions of the time that we were there. It just had to be on the timers, the same as everything else. But there were some areas that we just weren't allowed to use the stacker truck at all. Too close to where the horses might be. That was it. Too bad. You're not using it. And so you very, very occasionally we get to use these trailers. Now, I did actually have a point to this way back when I started. There's one fella that worked for us. He didn't really know how to reverse this trailer. He'd never done it before. I hadn't either. And I didn't worry about it. But he wanted to go and he wanted to practice reversing this trailer just to get his eye in, because he thought it was a good idea. Said, where could he go and do it? And we said, well, do it in the field right there. And we pointed to the field that was just the other side of the hedge to where we were working on one of the stacks. Let's go in that field. That field was the biggest field on the estate, and it was one of the biggest fields in the entire area. It was a mile from one end to the other and about half a mile wide. Now, there are other places in the UK where you get even bigger fields than that, but a field that's a mile from one end to the other and half a mile wide, and yeah, I can hear a few of you from Australia, Canada, southern states, well, you know, various places in the States, all chuckling at the thought of a tiny little field that's only a mile long and only half a mile wide. Well, by our standards, that's a big field, right? That is a huge field, and this was the biggest field in the area. But you mean, think of the size of it. A mile from one end to the other, half a mile wide, that's a pretty big field, yeah? There's nothing in the field. There is no lines going across that field whatsoever. We had a few bales stacked on one side of the field, that was it. We said, go in that field and have a bit of a practice. So we went into that field, and we heard him driving just for a little bit, and then it stopped. And then a few minutes later, he came walking back. We said, what's wrong? I backed it into the stack. What he'd done, he'd taken his trailer and he'd started reversing it. And you got a field that is a mile from one end to the other, and it's a half a mile wide. And he took his trailer, hang on, let me just stop a minute, and do that, and do that, there we go. He took his trailer and he reversed it straight into the stack of straw that we had on the side of the field. A mile from one end to the other and a half a mile wide, and he found the only item that we had put in the field, and he reversed the trailer straight into it. And we said, did you do that immediately, or did you at least shunt it around a bit first? He said he drove forward and then thought, right, I'll try reversing it here, and the first thing he did was drive it. Excuse me, sorry about that. The first thing he did was reverse it straight into the stacked bales in the field. That was literally the first thing he did, was to reverse it straight into the stacked bales in the field. He didn't even shunt it, not once. He just went forward a bit and then backed it into the bales. It was absolutely brilliant. It's like poetry in motion, it really was. Very occasionally you will meet someone like that, and don't judge them harshly for making those kinds of mistakes, because I can promise you, when you're doing a job like stacking 150,000 bales over the course of 6 weeks, someone that comes along and drives a trailer into the only obstacle in a field that is a mile by a half a mile is the sort of person that will brighten up your day. No matter how you're feeling, you're laughing at his pain and misery is just going to absolutely improve your quality of life. It really will. And yeah, it absolutely did. It improved our quality of life laughing at his pain and misery. Don't get me wrong, we weren't excessively mean to him or anything like that. And, you know, we all sort of helped to fix the trailer. It's not something that, you know, you sort of go and scream and yell at people for. There's no need for that. It's just incredibly funny. It's the sort of thing that just generally makes you feel better about life, to have someone who's working there who's so hapless, who just cannot help some of these things that just happen to them, and he manages to reverse into the only object in a field of that size. It was absolutely beautiful. It really was. It was genuinely, he didn't do a huge amount of damage. You know, we removed the electronics just from it a little bit. You know, well, it did crack the lenses and stuff, but we removed the rest of it, then got a big old sledgehammer and walloped the thing straight, and then put the cap back on, and we bought a new cap and stuff like that, and everything was fine. There were no issues. There were no problems. In the end, it was all was good with the world. Quite close enough to grab that bale, am I? I'm pretty sure I put it loading. Yes, I have. All was well with the world. It's just one of those little details that just makes you chuckle every time you think about it. It's been, you know, it's probably been 20 years. It's probably almost exactly 20 years since that happened, and I still laugh about it every time I think about it. biggest field in the entire area, and he managed to drive straight into the only obstacle there. I'm pretty sure I've actually I'm pretty sure I've actually told that story before. I've regaled you with, that's the word I was looking for, regaled. I've actually regaled you with that tale before, but it's always worth a retelling. Considering how few bales we've actually got here, I'm thinking that we may end up needing to get more hay on top of what we've already got. Now, we're only midsummer at the moment, so we do have the opportunity to go and get more hay a little bit later on, but yeah, we're... one thing, I'm not really wanting to do it like this. I don't really want to put it all out on the ground and do it like that. However, that being said, we could still try and do it all out on the ground. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This is... I've just started a new recording session, and there's something that I want to try, which wasn't that. Sliding the glass bales back out over the ground. No, I want to go over to here, and I'm just going to finish loading this one up a second. I'm going to bring this one round. I'm not going to change that at all for a minute, and I'm going to bring it back over to here. And I'm going to go back to something that I tried previously, which was on here. So, I need to go on to... you've got that one. You've got manage courses, speed limit settings, general drive settings. Now, I have been sent an updated version of this, but I didn't actually upload it. Oh. Start course recording. It won't even let me... Okay, so we won't do that for a minute. It won't even let me do it because I don't have the right tool on the back. So it does at least recognize that I've got to have the right tool on the back. Now, I have been quite open about my intense dislike for courseplay because of how difficult it is to get it all set up. But I've had a lot of people commenting saying that, as with many things... you shouldn't give up on it, and you should work at it, and it is worth putting the work in. Right. I'm going to do that because I'm a performer, because I'm an entertainer. It's not just about me here. It's also about all of you as well. I'm supposed to do this for your benefit as well as my own benefit. So it's not just about me disliking courseplay. It's also the fact that many of you like courseplay and would like me to use courseplay. So I do owe it to the masses to actually try a little bit harder with courseplay and see if I can't get it to actually work. So that's what I'm going to do in just a minute. We're going to get the rest of the hay in first. I'm going to bring that back in there. And then I will actually attempt to use courseplay and keep everybody happy. Except for me. And possibly other people who don't really care for courseplay, but, yeah. But keep a lot of people happy. How's that? Right, I will dump that back in there, and that is behind the line of the shed. So we will just go one last time. We will get the last of the hay. Now, there's a few things that I would like to do. One is I want to build another cattle pen so that I've got some more room for cows. Two is I would like to get a mixed feeder set up, and I've now got one. I've gone in and we've got this one available. This one's not on ModHub, so I'm not sure where it came from. If you join our Discord, there is a link in the description down below for Discord. It sends you off to another video. You get the link on there. If you join our Discord, you'll be able to find the link for this on there, because this is to do with our multiplayer. Well, that's about all we've got time for in today's episode, so we're going to go and take a little bit of a break. We need to chill out on the beach, relax, and build up some strength. So while we're doing that, if you've enjoyed the episode, then could you please head down below and give us a like? And if you really enjoyed it, then please tell your friends all about me. Get them to come and watch as well. That would be awesome. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. This is Frithgar. Goodbye, and see you later.